All right. Thank you all so much for joining another episode of Celeste, the Therapist Podcast. My name is Celeste. I'm a therapist from Boston. I have a special guest. This is his second time on the podcast. David, can you introduce yourself to the people?
Yeah, David Swanson. I pastor a church here on the south side of Chicago. It is incredibly windy today. It's like 50 to 60 mile an hour gusts here in
Yeah.
Chicago. So hopefully we'll hold it down in this conversation for the next little bit.
It looks sunny too. I'm
Yeah,
grateful.
no, it's not like raining or anything, but it's super windy.
Yes, yes. So one of the ways David was on few years ago, but I continue to follow your newsletters, and every time I read them, and he was doing newsletters before AI. I just want to say
That's right.
that.
That's right. For the record, still no AI.
I can tell, yeah. So his writing is very great, and it just I feel like it stirs something up in you, but there's always a sense of hope. It's still like this is what's happening, and then you kind of like, okay, you know what, we can do this. It's kind of like a little dopamine hit reading it.
Hmm.
So I guess I want to kind of start with like, what are you seeing now in the climate, in Chicago, around the world? Like, what are you noticing?
Yeah, I mean, I want to always answer that question very humbly, right? Because my perspective is super limited. I am in a particular neighborhood in a particular city. Our city was hit pretty hard by the federal immigration mass deportation efforts last year. A couple of very, very intense months where kind of felt like we were under siege here in Chicago. I think folks more recently will be familiar with what's happening in Minneapolis, and from talking with friends who pastor in that city, um, the efforts there have been even more intense. But for those couple of months here in Chicago, it just kind of felt like every day we were waking up to a new instance of threat and violence. What felt like terror, directed from the federal government. Vulnerable people being made to be very afraid. Really brutal tactics. And it did sort of feel like the fear mongering was the point to a certain extent. So that's been our local experience, and of course, in the midst of that, amazing to see churches, neighbors, or different nonprofit organizations rallying to care for their neighbors, to serve their neighborhoods. I'm a part of a multi or interfaith coalition that has come together, and that's just been a really really encouraging, beautiful space to be a part of over these months, and some good building that's happening there. So I think that's the case, in all of our locations. It can feel
Yeah.
overwhelming, over the past 12 months or so. It's hard to keep track of what's
Mhm.
happening, from
Mhm.
the federal government, which I think is actually one of the tactics to keep folks
Mhm.
a little bit distracted. And I think as much as we can stay grounded locally, we'll find lots of reasons to be encouraged in the middle of all of it.
I love that. And David, you've always been an advocate, even before like Trump got back into office and all of these surges that've been taking place. And I noticed, you would be on the front lines and protesting. Uh, what gives you the courage to kind of go there, and do the things that you do? Because it's one thing to, you know, the way that we advocated before kind of all of
Mm,
this extra chaos, it was a lot, but I don't feel like it felt, in my personal, like,
mhm.
it didn't feel as heavy as it feels now. Like there's a bit, it feels like pressure over um, community leaders,
Mhm,
healers.
mhm.
What gave you the courage to kind of go out there and do that work?
Yeah, yeah, I would agree, Celeste, with your assessment. I think folks who are in helping professions, our hearts are already tender to folks who have been made, marginal or vulnerable, by our society. And so when we see instances of, children being terrorized, or separated from their parents and caregivers, just as one example, there is a pressure there. There's a heaviness there that I do think we feel in particular sorts of ways. That's very, very real.
Yeah.
um, I do think, and we all have our own lanes, right? Like not everybody
Yeah.
is going to necessarily show
Mhm.
up at a protesting space. That's
Yes.
not for everybody. I've
Yeah.
tried to be really clear over the past,
Yes.
few months, speaking particularly to white Christians and white pastors, like, hey, our Supreme Court has basically given a green light to racial profiling as it relates to some of these mass deportation efforts. White people, this is a very clear line in the sand where we are called to be present simply
Mhm.
because of the way that racial privilege works in this country. So I think
Mhm.
identifying lanes is very, very important. To the question of courage, it is frightening to show up in some of these spaces, particularly when you see law enforcement with just this total
Mhm.
disregard and disrespect to human dignity, to human safety, um, not respecting visible clergy in any kind of way. That's a particular dynamic. And I want to say, I do find courage by showing up.
Yeah.
There is a sense of like the community coming together and walking through the streets of Chicago in a rally or a protest or showing up at a detention facility. Um, there are things to be nervous about in those spaces for sure. And boy, you look around at who's there. Oftentimes it's a lot of young people who are choosing to be there and to use their
Mhm.
voices, to stand in solidarity with each other. And so I actually leave those spaces generally feeling more encouraged than when I
Wow,
first
that's
show up,
awesome.
because
Yeah.
of who's there and their commitment to their neighbors. Whether or not they share my Christian faith or not, there is a kind of congregational experience,
Yeah.
of people coming together in that way. So, I think for folks maybe who've never had that experience of showing up in a public space, finding some little steps that are appropriate, that are, kind of within your lane, my hunch would be that a lot of folks would actually leave feeling like some of their agency having been
Yeah.
empowered a little bit rather than just kind of
Yeah.
watching from a distance. So, again,
Yeah.
not for everybody, but that's
Yeah.
been my experience.
I love that. One of the things on the podcast, I like to pull out moments like to help people because I think healing. A lot of times people think it's attached to money. Money would be great for a lot of things, but I don't want people to feel hopeless. And one of the things David's pointing out about the community aspect, right? It doesn't just happen at the protests. There's different spaces that you can be a part of community, especially
Yeah.
with everything going on. The last thing that you want to do is isolate
Yes.
because as you isolate, your mind starts wandering, and it becomes a very like war battle in your own head. And being around, going there, and like, okay, I'm gonna do this thing, and then you go around and you have all these people. There's something powerful that happens. There's this unspoken bond that takes place, regardless, like David said, regardless of their faith or
Hmm.
where what they do. Like, there's this commonality around, like, we want justice, right? We
Yeah.
want, yeah, that's good.
100%. I'm thinking about a woman in our church who, years ago, and this was more of a local situation in Chicago, that we were going to be protesting this really terrible instance of police brutality, and she, for lots of good reasons, didn't feel like she could actually show up publicly in that protesting space, but she
Mhm.
rallied some other folks to make some signs for us, and
Yes.
right, like that kind of coming together and doing that, like very creative, artistic, communal,
Yes.
was a really important thing for all of us, but for her in that particular way.
And another thing, quickly, so what David's pointing out, every moment counts, right? Just because you can't be on the front lines doesn't mean there aren't other things you can do. Everybody, like David said, that's not the space for everybody. I
Hmm.
podcast, I put my life out. That's not where everybody is, and I think everybody's calling is going to look different. But don't
Hmm.
minimize your calling,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Like,
right.
every piece creates the full body.
100%.
So one of the things I want to kind of talk about a little bit, because um, the way that things are happening and the egregiousness of it, Christ and faith is being put into the
Yeah.
language of it,
Yes.
um, and I think that some faith leaders might struggle with like calling things out. And I'm curious about what you think what role churches and
Hmm.
communities, church communities play in this climate. And do you think they have a responsibility to denounce things?
Hmm.
Because I think there's a lot of silence, and I don't think it's because people don't care. I think people are afraid.
I think that's right. And I think the same thing that we were saying about individuals in terms of their lanes, churches will have different lanes as well. And so I want to affirm that at first, right? Like a church's context is really important. You know, what's happening in your local neighborhood?
Yeah.
Where are the needs there? Where are the vulnerabilities there?
Yeah.
Also, where is your congregation in some of this? You know,
Yeah.
a pastor may be serving a church that has been really formed by different partisan media sources. And so,
Mhm.
you know, their work is doing some of that really intentional discipleship so that that congregation can be more open to joining the work of God, you know, in the world. So that would be an initial thing I'd want to say. But then you use the word denounce, and I actually think that's a really important word right now, because we are seeing this syncretism between a kind of violent nationalism, a violent racialized nationalism, and the Christian faith. And we are watching very public, influential leaders appropriate elements of Christianity, scriptures, hymnody, symbols, arts, music, and use it as a kind of justification for very
Mhm.
anti-Christ activity in the world. And so I think when we see that kind of thing happen, okay, yes, we each pick our lane, we understand our context, our congregation. That's always happening for us all the time. This is a
Mhm.
particular moment, right, where there is this very public thing happening. And I do think it requires a public response by those who have been given the privilege of being able to step into the pulpit, right, to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ, to point people to the lordship of Jesus Christ. What we're seeing right now is a threat to the lordship of Jesus Christ. We're
Yeah.
seeing the diminishment of the lordship of Jesus Christ, replaced by the violence of the state, cloaked in Christian imagery and language. And so while that denouncement will look different for different ones of us, I
Mhm.
do believe this is what this moment requires. And um, I think choosing silence is a sort of dereliction of our duty in this moment,
Mhm.
to the vocation that pastors have been called to, where we have kind of vowed to uphold this singular
Yeah.
allegiance to Jesus Christ, which I think is being publicly threatened right now.
Yeah, in a very scary way. Yeah, a very scary way. How do you think, as a leader, and other leaders that might be on listening to this, how do you avoid burnout? Because there's so many ways that support and care and things are needed, but also you're one person, right?
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
guess I want to share, like, what are you doing to avoid burnout, and hopefully it helps somebody that might be listening now.
Yeah, and I don't want to turn this into my own personal therapy session, but I've thought about
No,
this
this
a
is what
lot.
it
I
that's
know.
what it ends up being. People's never they don't usually say that, but they're like, afterwards, they'll be like, "Man, this felt like a therapy session."
Totally. I mean, when I follow your stuff, I'm like, oh yes, 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 this is good. I need this. So I'll give you one example.
Okay.
I toward the end of last year, I was watching some video footage of a protest here in Chicago,
Mhm.
and there were clergy at the protest, and it turned pretty aggressive
Mhm.
on the part of the state law enforcement that were there. And I'm just kind of watching this. I'm scrolling through it and I'm watching it. And all of a sudden, like, I notice I'm like my breathing had gotten, you know, kind of intense, and my palms were getting a little bit sweaty. And I was just like kind of on alert. And that's not a thing that happens to me very often, right? But like I was like, ooh, and I paused. And I just kind of thought for a second. I was like, oh, like my body thinks that I'm there right now, right? Like my body thinks that the thing I'm watching is happening to me right now, because it recognized similar situations that I had recently been in, right? Very, very similar. And I was like, oh, I can't watch this right now. Like this isn't healthy for my body, because I'm not there right now. And my body needs to know that I'm not there right now. Like, yes, there are times where I purposefully will put myself in that situation, but it is a choice. There's some discernment, right? I'm not choosing this. This is just kind of happening to me. And I actually do have the agency in this moment to put down the phone, to turn this thing off, and to take a minute and be like, well, here's where I actually am right now. Now, let me be really clear. Like, this is new for me. Like, you're the expert on this stuff. Like, I've had to learn this sort of later in life.
If you're not watching this, if you're listening, but I'm just getting so excited because I love this stuff. It's so good. Keep going. Sorry. Go ahead.
No. So I think that's been like a kind of honoring my limitations, right? Like honoring my embodied limitations. I can't be everywhere at once. Social media would make my body think that I can be everywhere at once, but I can't. And so I'm trying to learn how to kind of unapologetically step back, take breaks, set the phone down, and then like, oh no, I think this is a time to show up. Okay, let me then do that in a good and healthy, sort of way. And then let me, pull back to the next thing. Most of us can't be full-time protesters or full-time in intense situations. We're just not created for that kind of thing. So a big part of it, Celeste, for me, has just been learning to listen to my body in those kinds of moments, and then doing my best to like name what is the emotion that I'm actually feeling right now. So I mean, you can't see it, but right above my desk is like the feelings wheel, because I'm kind of a little bit remedial on this. Like this does not come intuitively, but like going like, oh, it's this, and a little bit more precise. Oh, I'm feeling this, right? I'm feeling, you know what I mean? And that has been really, really healthy and important for me in this season.
Wow, love it. Thank you. So as David's sharing, and if you're listening to the podcast, I talk a lot about the body and paying attention to what happens, because sometimes your body starts to activate before you realize it activates. And David shared that this is new for him. And being able to put the emotion shot in front of you, you're forcing yourself to articulate what's going on, because the thing is like we'll be struggling, but we're not naming it. And so our body
Mm-hmm.
starts to think like, okay, we got to struggle, like we got to stay on alert. And that's how we end up staying so activated all the
Yeah.
time. And we cannot be full-time activists. We are not robots, we're
Mm-mm.
human, and eventually we burn out.
Yeah.
And um, I, I feel, and I know the work needs to be done for people out here that are big advocates, but understand, I feel like you can fulfill it more deeply when you
Yes.
rest, when you take
Yes.
care of yourself. What are your thoughts about that?
No, I think that's right. Yeah, let me try not to get too preachy or theological about this, but our church is going through Revelation right now on Sunday mornings, and it really is just this vision of kind of the empire and what the empire does to us. So literally, I'm working on a sermon right now before you and I were talking, um, and I'm thinking about the way that the empire co-opts our emotions, right? So if the empire can sort of say, we are all powerful, we are inevitable. This imperial structure, right? It's in the Old Testament, it's Babylon, it's Assyria.
Mhm.
For the early church, it was the Roman Empire. We have our own experience of this, right? If it can portray itself as being inevitable, omnipotent, all powerful, well, then it can start to co-opt our emotions, right? It can say like, oh, so like I should live according to a scarcity mentality,
Mm,
because right, like this is just the reality. Um, and so when we agree to those rules, when we agree to that logic, burnout is inevitable, right?
yeah,
Like eventually disengaging, with the pursuit of justice is inevitable, because we are agreeing to a dehumanizing logic, right? We are agreeing to something that's actually not true. The empire is not all powerful. It doesn't last forever. Empires rise and they fall. The Christian perspective is that in the midst of all of that, Jesus is still Lord, which means that we can say yes to our assignment and say
mhm,
yes to Sabbath, right? We can say
yeah,
yes to stepping up and saying yes to celebrating. I
mm,
tell our church that even in the midst of seasons of fasting, Sunday is always the feast day. It's always the Lord's
yeah,
day, right? Even in times of fasting, there are feasts that we celebrate together. And so I think a big part of this for me is choosing to not operate by the logic of an imperial system
yeah,
that
yeah,
dehumanizes us, that operates on that
yeah,
logic. Yes, we are called, to stand against that, to denounce that. but we do so from an entirely different logic. It's the logic of God's grace, of God's gift, of God's Sabbath rest, and so on. And so if
Yeah.
our lives aren't reflecting that, right, like we can say all the things and do all the things, but if we're not experiencing the abundance and the grace and the gift of God, then we're actually still playing by rules that will end up chewing us up and spitting us out.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's so good. That's really good. And I think about speaking, this is a great segue into thinking about your book. I'm just gonna put it up on the screen because this book was written actually for 20, was it 2000 2020? Was it during the pandemic? Did it come out?
It came out just during the pandemic. Yep.
Yeah, redisciplining the white church, the systems, and I think now people are seeing some of the systems because of just how it's being like thrown in our face.
Hmm.
Um, I'm curious about how did this process come about? If you can just share with people about the process of the book and what people can gain from the book, because it gives a lot of insight. And I never, I grew up in church, but I didn't real, I read this a few years ago, but just thinking about the way some, and I went to Ghana. I went to Ghana and I seen where the slaves were held
Yeah.
before,
Yeah.
and upstairs. I think the
Yeah.
thing that really like got me emotional is like upstairs they were having church, and this is the same people that taught
Yes.
about church. So I'm curious about like how this came about for you and what can people gain and understand through reading this.
Yeah, I thank you. I think maybe the point of connection to our conversation so far is the way I do try to acknowledge the emotional nature of being human in this book. I think so many of our kind of anti-racist efforts over the years have been directed at our heads, at education, at learning. Hey, if you know better, you'll do better.
Mhm.
I just don't think that's how humans work, right? Like we are deeply feeling creatures. We desire our way through the world. We love our way through the world. We're motivated by our emotions. This is not a bad thing. God created us this way, right? This is
Mhm.
why Jesus comes to turn hearts of stone into hearts of flesh, right? To give us new loves. And so
Yeah.
I try to cast a vision in this book to say, for the sake of the reconciliation of the church across these old lines of hostility and division, we need to think about discipleship, particularly for white Christians, in a way that engages us emotionally, that acknowledges the way that our emotions have been hijacked by a kind of societal racialized discipleship, and
Mhm.
to create liturgies of formation which redisciple those emotions, those desires, those longings, which then prime us for the kind of racial justice and reconciliation that I believe our churches are meant to demonstrate in the world. So it is certainly a book, directed at white Christians, but I hope the vision of discipleship there is one that would resonate kind of beyond that.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I feel like all the stuff that you're doing and going on, it's been deeply rooted in you. Like it's probably like natural. It just feels natural to be present, and
Mm.
I'm curious about what's giving you hope because you're preparing a sermon for Sunday, which means you're still pushing forward. What's giving you hope during this season right now?
Yeah, I always like to differentiate between optimism and hope, and we need both. Like there's things I need to be optimistic about. Like for example,
Mhm.
right now I'm a little bit optimistic that the federal government hasn't returned to Chicago yet. We kind of thought they might have shown up already in early March, and they haven't. And I feel a little optimistic about that. That could change tomorrow. But I do think Christian hope is a little bit different in that it's not hope if we can like know exactly how it's going to play out. Christian hope is
Mhm.
that ability to receive it in faith, right? And this is the testimony of the saints over generations who have suffered tremendously, in different places in this country and around the world, that they maintained hope even when their eyes would say there's nothing to be hopeful about, right? Even when their ears would say we've heard nothing to be hopeful about. this is the Christian nature of hope, that it is so profoundly rooted in the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ that nothing in this world can overcome it. So that is my hope. My hope is in the return of Jesus Christ, and that cannot be stolen from us. That cannot be taken from us. Nobody gets to claim that, right? Because it's been given freely to us in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And I actually think that's really, really important for us to remember right now, because hope can seem very fleeting. We're having stuff exposed and revealed right now where we had put confidence in something, and all of a sudden we realized, boy, that foundation was really cracked, was really insecure. And so for Christians to kind of claim that that certain hope in our Lord Jesus, who lives and reigns today, who is present to us in his Spirit today, like that is our hope. And if that's true, then that means that we can go through seasons of wilderness where the floor seems to drop away, or where we feel called into something we've never been in before, experiencing something we've never experienced before, and not lose hope, not default to despair, not default to cynicism. So I have to keep coming back to that, as a person of Christian faith. And then of course it gets worked out right in the daily stuff of life. But I do find a lot of joy in the midst of, from that kind of hope.
I love that for you. And I think about having faith and believing in God. There's science that
Yeah.
studies show like it does something powerful for people. So it's not, I think that I love that you have been able to not just sit in hope, but also like you're doing things, you're taking care of
Mm-hmm.
yourself. Because first, the way I grew up in the Christian church, it just felt like things are bad, are hard, and that's just life. And
Right, right,
it felt like nothing was going to change.
right.
Now, like I have faith, I believe in God, and I have this. I would read about peace that surpasses all
Yeah,
understanding,
yeah.
and I say that to people, and I say I hold on to different emotions. I feel overwhelmed by the nature of society, but also I have peace. And
Yes.
it's not because I pretend like things aren't hard or aren't
Right.
going on, but it's a lot of the mindset shifts that I do and the things that I do to feed my spirit.
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage people to continue feeding your spirit. The way David was scrolling and recognized, let me put the phone down, be mindful of that because there's something addictive about
Mm-hmm.
um, watching hard things. It's
Mm-hmm.
not, it evokes something in you. And even if it's hard, you might find yourself still doing that and
Mm-hmm.
forgetting that you have agency over your
Right.
system. And it's not by accident that they put this stuff in our face because they want to keep us distracted, that we're moving off of emotion, right? Emotion is great, but we have to be mindful on the direction we're going with it. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
No, it's like for me, it's a question of like what is my emotion rooted in? Is it rooted in
Yes,
reality, or is it rooted in
yes,
a lie, right? And that kind of
yes.
mindless scrolling, or the kind that kind of intentional cynicism that we're being fed, that's not rooted
Mhm.
in reality. That's rooted in a
Right.
particular kind of propaganda that is meant, as you say, to keep us distracted, to keep us
Mhm.
disengaged.
Mhm.
I want my emotions to be grounded in what is good and beautiful and true.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
doesn't mean, like you said, ignoring the hard stuff. Like, no,
Right.
because something can't be good and a lie at the same time, right? Like,
Right.
it can only be good if it's true. So we got to tell the truth, even when it's challenging. But that is a
Yeah.
good thing to do. That is a true thing to do. And it leads to beauty in our lives. So that's the work that I feel like I'm trying to pay attention to personally in this season is
Yeah.
like, where are those emotions coming from? And the good thing about this for me is like I recognize, oh, actually if I trace this upstream a little bit, it's pointing to something that's not true.
Yes.
Like, oh, the
Good.
world is not a scarcity place, but
Yeah.
somehow that seeped in. Oh, okay, well, I can choose to move from that, right? Like I can choose to
Yeah.
meditate on something else, to direct my attention to something else, to get around some
Yeah.
people who are going to remind me, right, of the
Yes.
abundance of God's creation and so on. So yeah, I love what you're saying there. I think that's really important.
Yes. Nice. I have a quote on my calendar, be still and know that I'm God. And in the moments of chaos and some stillness, can David continues to give me gems to point out, but when he's able to pause and reflect and name, the clarity comes. How do you get clarity if we're scrolling all day?
Right.
Right. And so you make time, make intentional time, because sometimes people say they can't find time. And I'll tell them to, like, okay, take your phone out. Let's look at your screen time, see how long you've been on there. And people are shocked because it happens so mindlessly.
Yes.
So I would really encourage people, as I'm sharing what I'm encouraging people to do, I'm going to let you end the podcast by sharing last words where you think can help people in this time of history that we're in. I want you to think about that. And I just want to encourage people to be be mindful and make time to be still so that you can feel and see what's going on with you. If you run your car 24/7, never, ram your engine, I mean your gas, eventually it's going to burn out, and that's what's happening with people. I think we have really good people that are burning out, and I'm sure when David has to pause, there's something in you that feels like, no,
Oh
don't
yeah.
do it.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Every
Like,
time. Every
yeah,
time.
like don't do it. And so you're fighting yourself with this
Yeah.
pause and this rest. Eventually it'll start to feel more better. But when you start this process, it's going to be hard. But that doesn't mean it's wrong, right?
That's right.
Where
That's
is
right.
it rooted in? Why it feels so hard? Because um, your system has been programmed to think that that's what you're supposed to do all the time, and you can't. So know that you have power to pause. You have power to create changes. You just got to make time for stillness. And I'm going to let David share something for you all as well.
Well, I'm a witness to what you just said. I've been practicing a Sabbath day, a day of rest for close to 20 years now. And I remember early on being very confused of like, why did I feel so anxious and funky on my Sabbath day, you know? And I was like, oh, maybe I'm doing something wrong. You know,
Yeah.
I shouldn't be taking this day because it doesn't feel good. And I'll be honest, it took years to recognize like, oh no, I've just given enough space for the stuff that's there to surface, you know, like it's
Yes.
been there, right? Like it's been there. I've
Yep.
just slowed down enough to be like, oh,
Yes.
I'm a little insecure. I'm a little bit anxious. I'm a little bit
Yes.
frustrated. I'm a little bit, you know what I mean? Like,
Yep. Yep.
and because my practice is to take a 24-hour period of rest, what I've come to understand is that on most Sabbath days for me, which for me is a Tuesday, it takes about like till late morning for that stuff to kind of like work its way out. And
Yeah.
then the rest of the day, like I'm good. Like I'm
Hmm.
good.
Hmm.
And it doesn't freak me out anymore. Like it just happened last week. I remember I was like
Hmm.
standing in my living room, like, man, I'm feeling off today, you know? And I was like, oh, it's Tuesday. Totally normal. Totally, what am I
Yeah.
feeling? Da, 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 da. Okay, 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 good. And then like on to the next thing, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So to your point, Celeste, about initially it may not feel right, it may not feel good, like that's okay, you know, stick with it, allow that stuff to kind of get worked out in you, and your body will actually develop kind of new instincts and intuitions around this, where you'll be able to like almost welcome that, like, oh no, it's actually good that I recognize that I'm feeling anxious and I just
Yes.
have been too busy to notice that. That's a good thing, and now I
Yes.
can name that and kind of move forward. So I'm hopeful. So here's kind of the last thing I'll say. I'm hopeful that as chaotic as this season is, as like legitimately terrible as it is, and it is, that there will be invitations to different ones of us in this season, that we won't find ourselves just like back on our heels, but we will
Mhm.
hear the voice of God in this season going,
Mhm.
this is what I desire for you. This is what I want to do in you. This is how I want to heal you, put you together, call you into the next thing. And I think something about seasons of disruption and chaos can actually open up that kind of space for those of us, again, to your point, willing to slow down enough, quiet ourselves enough to actually hear that invitation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's so through a lot of awakenings I had have been when I've had hard times,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I don't say this to people when they're in the middle of struggle, but I know that what comes out of it is clarity. It's
Mm-hmm.
spirit. You know, I've accepted one of the things that has helped me is accepted that there's hard moments in life, the same way there's rain and then there's a sun. And there's nothing I can do about it. That
Right.
the acceptance is there. And as David was sharing, when he's feeling these things and he's like, cool. That's a good thing. I want you to know that your body's doing what it's designed to do. When it alerts you something's wrong, it's kind of it's signaling, hey, let's slow down, let's do this. But a lot of us haven't been taught how to do that. A lot of us haven't been taught how to listen to our body. And so when people tell me like what's happening, I'm like, oh my God, that's exciting. I was like, this sucks. I was like, I get it, right? Because you was like, it's a good thing. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm like, let me explain to people why it's a good thing.
Right.
It's because that means you have awareness and you can work on changing the trajectory and the direction. And it may not happen overnight. It may not happen that day, but at least your decision making is not going to be based off of your emotion. And unfortunately, a lot of us make decisions off of our emotion. What I mean by that, you are not going forward with some visions and goals, right? Because of fear. But where's that fear coming from, right? So all of the things that you said around the emotion and how you've been challenging yourself, I think is really good, and it's definitely going to help my audience. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, well, thank you for everything you taught me from a distance over the years on all of this stuff. It's really good and really
Yes,
important for us.
good. Yeah, I'm excited. Yes, all the way in Chicago.
That's right.
David, let people know how they can reach you, and if they wanted to be a part of the newsletter rotation.
Yeah, so I try to keep everything just on my website, which is just DW David Winston, dwswanson.com. And just from the homepage there, there's the social media stuff and a link to subscribe to the newsletter for free, which I try to get out every couple of weeks or so. Yeah, love to stay in touch with folks that way.
Thank you. Yeah, all the way from Boston, I'm getting the newsletters. Thank you so much. I will speak to you guys later.